East Asia is home to a number of economies that have advanced from middle-income status to high-income status. Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and Singapore have all caught up to become more technologically advanced countries, and their citizens are enjoying high living standards. However, Malaysia and Thailand appear to be entangled in a middle-income trap. Both Malaysia and Thailand were seen as part of East Asia's miracle growth economies in the early 1990s, rapidly moving into high-income status. In fact, at one time they were even known as Asian tigers. However, since the mid-1990s, both countries have experienced a noticeable slowdown in growth. So, what happened? Why are Malaysia and Thailand now stuck in the middle-income trap for more than 30 years? But before starting the long debate, first let us understand the concept of the middle-income trap. The middle-income trap, MIT, concept refers to the risk of a country that has experienced rapid growth based on low-wage, unskilled labor, low added-value manufacturing, and heavy reliance on exports stagnating at the middle-income level, as well as failing to graduate to upper-income status. Economists and political decision-makers are much concerned about the potential consequences of this economic growth slowdown in East Asia's middle-income countries like Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, etc. So, coming back to our point of discussion, Malaysia and Thailand were widely expected to make successful transitions to high-income status in the early 1990s. Both countries had among the highest growth rates in the world between the 1950s and the early 1990s, thanks to the rapid expansion of an export-oriented manufacturing sector. This period of rapid growth was accompanied by significant structural change, as measured by manufacturing value added as a percentage of GDP and export product complexity. There were only few other countries in this period that had such impressive rates of structural transformation outside of the Northeast Asian miracle economies. However, when the Asian financial crisis, AFC, hit in 1996-1997, economic growth in these two countries, as well as other countries that had experienced rapid growth up to that point, like Indonesia and Korea, dropped significantly. The slowdown in growth that began in the mid-1990s was also accompanied by a decline in investment, stagnant manufacturing exports, and in Malaysia's case, a slow rate of structural transformation. While it was widely assumed that the initial recession would be brief and that rapid economic growth would return to these two countries as it did to Korea, however, the slowdown has now lasted for more than 3 decades. The middle-income trap is seen as a common feature of both Malaysia and Thailand. Now let's explore the determinants or factors of middle-income trap in Malaysia and Thailand. 1. Contraction of foreign investment. All of the crisis-affected Asian economies, including Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, the Philippines, and South Korea, saw a decrease in this investment ratio. Thailand and Malaysia, on the other hand, experienced the steepest declines. The decline in investment rates in these two countries is considered to be the main factor involved in the drop of economic growth since the Asian financial crisis, AFC, of 1996-1997. Malaysia and Thailand's investment as a percentage of GDP increased steadily during the 1960s and 1970s, before exploding in the mid-1980s. However, investment rates in the two countries fell sharply from a high of over 40% in the mid-1990s to around 25% in the 2000s. 2. Politics. Some analysts claim that the reason for downfall is more politics than economics. The middle-income trap in these two countries reflects the clientelist nature of the political settlement in Malaysia and Thailand, where political elites have little incentive to enact the institutional reforms required for future growth and structural transformation. Clientelism, also known as client politics, is the practice of exchanging goods and services in exchange for political support. Therefore, in order to break the middle-income cycle, it would be necessary for them to move out of the clientelist nature of the current political settlement that both countries find themselves in. The outlook for this to happen does not look positive for Malaysia and Thailand in the foreseeable future. 3. Innovation and technology. Despite a slew of bold policy initiatives and long-term plans, Malaysia, as well as Thailand, are struggling with a number of issues that are preventing or delaying their transition to high-income status, including a lack of innovation, low technology investment, declining educational standards, high labor costs, and stagnant productivity. If a country's R&D expenditure as a percentage of GDP is greater than 2%, it is considered science and technology focused. According to a 2015 report, Malaysia had an R&D expenditure around 1.3%, and Thailand had 0.63%. As a result, these two countries are still a long way from becoming high-income countries. It is also important to highlight here that even after more than 3 decades of industrialization, workers' lack of discipline and skills as well as top and middle management shortages remain a problem. In both the countries, locals only assemble or produce simple parts, while foreigners continue to create and capture the majority of value. 4. Higher wages and lower labor productivity. The main feature of East Asia's economic development is its labor-intensive industrialization. As a result, maintaining East Asian industrialization requires the ability to consistently secure a high-quality labor force at relatively low wage levels. The labor productivity metric is calculated by taking the amount of added value produced per capita in the most developed country, such as the United States, and comparing it to how far a given country's figure differs from the US figure. Thailand saw a significant drop from 5.2% in 2000 to 2005 to 3.2% in 2005 to 2014, while Malaysia saw a similar drop from 3.1% to 2.3% in the same time period. In fact, the high proportion of foreign workers is Malaysia's most serious problem. Migrant foreign workers are thought to have made a negligible contribution to labor productivity. It is also worth noting that over the 15 years from 2000 to 2014, these two countries have barely shown signs of catching up to the United States. 5. GDP and growth rate. According to the World Bank's standard classifications, Malaysia belongs to the upper middle income group of countries. Malaysia has a growth rate above 4%, is relatively safe to make it out with the old standard in a few years' time. However, the risk is that the rate figure keeps lowering down each year and may become unsustainable in the future. If not accompanied by political and institutional change, economic progress will be limited with this 4 to 5% growth rate, and the country will remain stuck in the middle income trap. If we talk about Thailand, its average annual growth rate of real GDP per person was 8.4% during the decade of economic boom that ended in 1997. The corresponding growth rate since 2000 has been 4.1%. Hence, the current GDP per capita coupled with low growth rate of about 4% or less is not sustainable at all. It's not a good sign to get this kind of growth rate when your GDP per capita is still as low as $7,000. Not sure if Thailand can pull itself out of the mud and boost the growth rate up again. Moreover, Malaysia's and Thailand's total factor productivity has not grown as much as Korea's or Japan's, despite strong growth and significant improvements in export sophistication. Now, you might be thinking, if Malaysia and Thailand are still the prisoners of middle-income trap, how did other Asian countries, like Japan and South Korea, overcome the trap, since all these countries faced the 1996-1997 financial crisis? Well, the answer is they overcame the trap mostly with the help of technology and industrialization. And apart from that, companies in both the countries were given assistance from the government in the form of import tariffs and export subsidies, as they were competitive and able to sell their products internationally. The key to success for both Japan and South Korea was to be competitive, and export was their mantra. So, besides innovation and technology, what strategies should Malaysia and Thailand adopt to overcome the middle-income trap? It is true that the governments of Malaysia and Thailand have always intended to play a significant role in both industrial upgrading and changing the composition of exports. Foreign firms, on the other hand, have eventually introduced new industries and products. However, all these efforts were not enough to break the middle-income cycle. Openness to international trade and investment, such as lower tariffs and foreign investment, is widely acknowledged as a necessary condition for developing countries to achieve rapid catch-up growth. However, these conditions are unlikely to be sufficient for countries wishing to transition to a high-income status. There is a need for local private firms to discover their competitive advantages in resource-based industries and the service sector, rather than the core manufacturing industries. Likewise, there is also a need to prioritize niche products and niche markets over new products and manufacturing technology. Thailand must also address emerging social issues, such as widening economic disparities, the rapid transition to an aging society, and a deteriorating environment. Moreover, the policymakers in both the countries should promote entrepreneurship and innovation to begin reaping the benefits of information networks and skilled labor. As professionals and highly skilled workers are an essential component of high value-added modern services and manufacturing. Therefore, the countries must invest in transforming their educational systems as well, in order to equip their workforce with the ability to adapt to changing conditions. The middle-income trap is an economic phenomenon, but breaking free from it requires both political will as well as financial reform. Many of Asia's middle-income countries are having difficulty generating the political will to implement the necessary reforms. In order to escape the trap, political structures in the region's middle-income countries must change. And it's a challenge that Thailand's, Malaysia's, and other middle-income countries' leaders must meet. So, it appears that Thailand and Malaysia will struggle to become a high-income country like Japan, South Korea, or Singapore, unless they have political will and financial reforms, a breakthrough opportunity, or if they come up with a revolutionary technology. If you found this video informative and enjoyed the content, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the like button as well. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask us in the comment section below. We will be happy to answer them for you. Thank you for watching.